Tucked behind ivy-covered gates in the Norfolk countryside stands a Gothic estate untouched by fame, yet shaped by royalty. This is the private world of Lady Jane Fellows, sister to Princess Diana. But unlike the cameras that once chased her family, here, silence reigns. What kind of life unfolds when legacy is guarded, not performed? Today, we step inside her $3 million retreat to explore the home, wealth, and quiet power of a woman who never needed a spotlight. Before the world knew Diana, there was Jane. Lady Jane Fellows was born in 1957 into one of England's most storied aristocratic families, the Spencers. Raised in the grand Althorpe estate, surrounded by tapestries, oil paintings, and centuries of silent expectation, Jane learned early that in her world, presence was measured not by volume, but by stillness. What is it like to grow up in a home where every hall echoes with history, where every meal is served under the watchful gaze of ancestors long gone? In the heart of Northamptonshire, Jane was the second daughter of Earl Spencer and Frances Roche, a child of tradition, born into privilege, but shaped by something deeper: restraint. While other children played, Jane observed. While others performed, she listened. At West Heath boarding school in Kent, Jane stood out not for flash or flair, but for quiet brilliance. She became head girl, a role that demanded more than good grades. It required balance, diplomacy, and the ability to lead without ever needing to raise her voice. From her earliest years, Jane embodied a rare kind of grace, the ability to hold a room by simply being present. And then came the spotlight. But not for her. As her younger sister Diana was thrust into the public gaze, first as a shy kindergarten assistant, then as the most famous woman in the world, Jane remained in the shadows, not by accident, by choice. While cameras chased Diana down palace steps and across red carpets, Jane stood silently behind the scenes, never writing a tell-all, never speaking to tabloids, never selling the memory of her sister for headlines. Why? Because for Jane, loyalty was not performative. It was sacred. In 1978, she married Robert Fellows, a man whose job required even greater discretion than her own. As private secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, Robert stood at the center of the monarchy's operations, and Jane, ever composed, became his perfect counterpart. She attended royal events not as a celebrity, but as an observer. She walked the halls of Buckingham Palace with the same quiet reverence that she once held as a schoolgirl in Althorpe, eyes wide, mouth closed, absorbing everything. And yet, Jane was never invisible. She was trusted. She was present. In a family where public emotion often overshadowed private grief, Jane became a safe harbor. She never offered commentary. She never corrected the record. But she never let go of the truth either. That truth found its voice, not in a press conference, not in a documentary, but in a single moment, decades after Diana's death. In 2018, at Prince Harry's wedding, it was Jane, not a royal aide or bishop, who was asked to read from the Bible. Her voice, calm and measured, echoed through Windsor Chapel like a whisper across time. It was Diana's sister, standing in her place, not just remembering her, but embodying her legacy. Why did Harry choose Jane? Because among the noise of royalty, there are very few who still understand silence, who still value dignity over drama. And Jane? She had spent her entire life proving that she did. Her story isn't one of tabloids or tiaras. It's the story of a woman who could have had the world's attention, but chose instead to be present where it mattered most, at family dinners, quiet funerals, and late-night phone calls that no one ever reported. She carried Diana's memory not in speeches but in soul, and maybe that's what makes Jane Fellows so remarkable. Not that she disappeared, but that she stayed, just out of view, just behind the curtain, holding everything together with quiet, unshakable grace. And it's in that same spirit of serenity that she built her Norfolk estate, a home that whispers rather than shouts. Shall we step inside? Residence in Norfolk. It begins with a gate, not the kind you'd find in front of a palace, no towering gold, no guards in uniform. This one is wrought iron, weathered, and half hidden beneath a veil of ivy. It creaks slightly when it opens, as if politely announcing your arrival. And just like that, you've stepped into another world. Welcome to Lady Jane Fellowes' Norfolk residence, a $3 million Gothic revival home nestled within 14.5 acres of tranquil, tree-lined land. But here's the thing, it's not just a house. It's a living portrait of the woman who owns it. From the very first glance, you realize this is not royalty as you know it. There are no paparazzi-proof gates, no garish gold trim. Instead, everything about the estate hums with quiet dignity. The main house rises in stoic elegance, its stone facade kissed by time and climbing vines. Windows, tall, narrow, reverent, stare outward like watchful eyes. A soft kind of symmetry wraps around the structure, never demanding attention, only inviting curiosity. What kind of life unfolds behind walls like these? A life of crowns and cameras? Or something more human, more grounded? Step through the front door and into the grand reception hall, and the silence greets you like an old friend. Dark wood panels line the walls, whispering stories of another era. Stained glass windows filter light into jewel-toned fragments on the marble floor. Above, a high ceiling breathes, stretching up like a cathedral, not to impress, but to give space for reflection. The staircase, sweeping and carved, curls gently upward, as if inviting you to take your time. It's a house that knows how to pause. Turn left, and you'll find the formal drawing room, the heart of the home's soul. Velvet upholstered armchairs circle a marble fireplace. Heirloom portraits, likely generations of Spencer lineage, gaze down, not with judgment, but familiarity. The crown molding overhead is intricate, yet soft. Nothing here screams for attention. Everything simply exists. The light in this room is soft, diffused by heavy drapes and the thick foliage outside. You can almost imagine Lady Jane sitting here with a grandchild, reading aloud from a worn book, her voice the only sound in the world. Further in lies the dining room, a masterclass in British refinement. A long mahogany table stretches beneath a vintage chandelier, flanked by high-backed chairs worn smooth with time. Silver candelabras stand like soldiers of tradition, their wax trails marking meals past. The walls, draped in silk wallpaper, floral, delicate, timeless. No television, no tech. Only the gentle hum of memory and the scent of polished wood. But perhaps the most telling room is the garden room, a quiet sanctuary bathed in green and gold. Floral upholstery, soft linen curtains, and windows that stretch from floor to ceiling. Here, time slows. The only soundtrack is birdsong. It's easy to imagine Jane here on a Sunday afternoon, cup of tea in hand, letter half-written, a breeze shifting the petals in the vase beside her. The estate holds 6 bedrooms, each designed not to impress, but to restore. And then there's the primary suite, part sanctuary, part statement. A carved 4-poster bed anchors the space beneath a vaulted ceiling. The walk-in dressing room is lined with cedar, its drawers filled with cashmere and handwritten notes. The ensuite marble bath glistens in candlelight, more Roman spa than bathroom, a space built for silence and self-care. Large windows open onto lawns that roll like green waves into the distance. Beyond them, the true magic of the estate, the gardens. Stone terraces lead to a park-style expanse, dotted with age-old oaks and Victorian blooms. A walled vegetable garden nods to the old estate traditions. Not for show, but for sustenance. A restored greenhouse hums with orchids, heirloom roses, and the gentle rhythm of growth. There's a brick summer house tucked into one corner, the perfect place for writing, sketching, or simply sitting in the hush of sunset. And just beyond a hedgerow sits a 2-story steel barn, discreetly placed. Not just storage, but potential. A vintage car collection, an equestrian dream, a space to create, to reflect. The property also features 3 charming cottages, ideal for guests, staff, or even adult children and their families. Each is self-contained, yet tied to the estate's heartbeat. For modern needs, there's a home cinema and a private gym, both tastefully integrated without disrupting the timelessness of the space. No flashing LEDs, no over-the-top designs, just comfort, wrapped in history. Because this house isn't about status, it's about stillness, it's about memory, it's about a life deliberately lived away from noise, curated with care. Lady Jane Fellows didn't build a mansion to be admired. She built a home to be lived in, quietly, deeply, honestly. And perhaps that's why, even among royal-connected estates, this one stands apart. Because it doesn't just house history, it honors it. But how did such a serene home come to be? What fortune, quiet or grand, made it possible? Let's step into the world of wealth, where legacy whispers louder than cash ever could. In the world of royalty and aristocracy, wealth is often paraded, measured in jewels worn at banquets, estates showcased on magazine covers, and lavish spending that keeps headlines fed. But Jane Fellows doesn't live in that world. Not really. Her wealth exists, unquestionably, but it does not wave. It does not announce. It simply endures. Lady Jane's estimated net worth stands around $6 million. To the ultra-rich, that might seem modest. But in truth, her fortune is far richer than what a bank statement can explain. Because hers is not a story of sudden fame or viral success. It is the quiet accumulation of heritage, discretion, and generational grace. Much of her financial foundation stems from her birthright as a daughter of the Spencer family, whose legacy dates back to the 15th century and whose assets include Althorpe House, a sprawling Northamptonshire estate with over 500 years of aristocratic history. But Jane didn't merely inherit, she added. When she married Robert Fellows, a man of deep royal standing and impeccable professional distinction, she stepped into another legacy, one not just of land or lineage, but of quiet influence. Robert served as private secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, one of the highest non-royal positions within the monarchy. His role wasn't flashy, but it was vital and well compensated. Over decades of loyal service, Robert built both a sterling reputation and a secure financial future for their family. Together, the couple made prudent choices. They didn't chase headlines or trendy investments. They restored properties instead of flipping them. They focused on preservation of both wealth and meaning. But beyond the tangible assets, Lady Jane's fortune is also spiritual. It's the wealth of a woman who values handwritten letters more than brand endorsements, who chooses heirloom silverware over celebrity dinner parties, who invests her energy not into growing public attention, but into preserving private integrity. She has never sold her story, never posed for a glossy magazine spread, never accepted lucrative offers to speak about Diana or the royal family. In today's age of instant monetization, that's not just rare, it's revolutionary. There's also a very intentional elegance in how Jane spends. The restoration of her Victorian greenhouse wasn't done for show, but for care. The maintenance of her estate isn't for property value, but for peace. It's in the quiet investments, the rare books she collects, the charities she uplifts without public credit, the warm interiors of her home, designed not to impress strangers but to comfort those she loves. It's easy to admire castles. It's harder, and more rewarding, to understand the life that sustains one. Because Jane's fortune isn't about wealth for wealth's sake. It's about stewardship, a responsibility to guard the past, live purposefully in the present, and leave something gentle for the future. And in every decision, from the understated art on her walls to the thoughtful way she curates her daily life, she honors that responsibility. But Jane doesn't only preserve legacies, she uplifts lives. Let's now turn to the causes she champions and how she transforms quiet compassion into powerful impact. Philanthropy. What compels a woman born into wealth and aristocracy to step into the shadows, not to escape, but to serve? For Lady Jane Fellows, compassion was never a performance. It was a calling, a quiet one. Long before philanthropy became fashionable, Jane had already chosen a path of meaningful, often invisible service. She didn't host charity galas. She didn't put her name on hospital wings. Instead, she walked into the darkest corners of society and listened. Her heart found its most enduring home in Only Connect, a UK-based organization that works with young people at risk of, or already entangled in, the criminal justice system. It's not a glamorous charity. There are no televised appeals, but that's precisely why Jane gravitated toward it. Because it mirrored her values: substance over spectacle, impact over applause. As a committee member, and later as chair of the support board, Jane was more than a symbolic figure. She became a quiet architect of hope, helping to raise funds, shape strategy, and open doors that might otherwise have remained closed. But why this cause? Why pour energy into a world so far removed from aristocratic comfort? Perhaps it's because Jane, more than most, understands what it feels like to be misunderstood. To see her family's pain twisted into tabloid drama. To live with the grief of losing a sister the world adored, yet never truly knew. Perhaps she saw, in the eyes of those young people, the ache of being unseen for who you really are. And so she gave them what few others could: belief, time, a second chance. Jane championed rehabilitation programs, vocational training, emotional counseling, and creative workshops, practical, deeply human tools that allowed young lives to begin again. She helped broker key partnerships with government agencies and fellow philanthropists. She made personal introductions that unlocked crucial funding. And when the spotlight threatened to shine on her work, she quietly stepped back, letting the success of others speak louder than her name ever could. Those who've worked with her describe her not as a benefactor, but as a presence, steady, warm, unshakably human. She sat in strategy meetings, took calls from struggling youth workers, and followed up when no one else did. To the young men and women whose lives were turned around, she wasn't Lady Jane. She was simply Jane, the woman who listened when no one else would. There are no viral clips, no Instagram posts, but there are letters, dozens of them, handwritten thank yous, photos of graduates, invitations to weddings and baby showers from former inmates who rebuilt their lives, in part because someone believed they could. Jane keeps them all in a drawer, because to her, that's the real reward. And perhaps that's the greatest measure of nobility, not in land or title, but in the willingness to help and expect nothing in return. But what kind of life allows such compassion to grow and thrive? Who surrounds Jane in her quiet haven? And how does she find peace in a world that never truly forgets the name Spencer? Personal life. In a world built on noise, where fame is measured by clicks and attention is currency, Jane Fellows lives by an entirely different rhythm, one that values quiet over clamor, presence over publicity, and grace over grandeur. Her life, tucked within the ivy-clad Norfolk estate, flows not in the grand gestures of celebrity, but in the gentle rituals of a woman who knows who she is, and more importantly, who she doesn't need to be. Married for over 4 decades to Robert Fellows, Jane has lived through the heart of royal transformation. From Queen Elizabeth II's reign, To the modern monarchy of Charles III, she has seen it all and spoken of none. Their marriage is not marked by red carpet appearances or romantic headlines. It's something quieter, deeper, built on mutual respect, shared history, and a love that thrives far from the public eye. Together, they raised 3 children: Emily, Alexander, and Eleanor, none of whom have courted attention or chased royal fame. You won't find them on social media. There are no explosive interviews, no memoirs, just private lives intentionally lived. It's no accident. Jane and Robert taught their children the value of discretion. That being part of a famous family didn't require becoming a public figure. That true character doesn't demand a camera. At home, Jane is said to be deeply hands-on. She tends to her own flower arrangements, often picking blooms from her estate's garden to decorate the dining room herself. She bakes with her grandchildren in a sunlit kitchen that smells of rosemary and citrus. She hosts family lunches that stretch into long walks through the grounds, with laughter echoing between clipped hedges and old stone walls. Her style is as elegant as it is effortless. Cashmere shawls, wool skirts, pearl studs, and always a handwritten thank you note not far from reach. She believes in the power of pen over keyboard, in the sanctity of listening over speaking. Even her faith is practiced in quiet. She attends church discreetly, slipping into a back pew moments before the service begins, and leaving with a nod rather than a wave. It's not performance. It's devotion. There is something almost timeless in her way of living, as though she carries the soul of another era, one not yet corrupted by constant exposure. She reads more than she watches. She walks more than she drives. She reflects more than she reacts. Her relationships are few, but deep. And one of the deepest is with Prince Harry, her nephew, a bond forged not only by family ties, but by grief, trust, and unspoken understanding. When Harry invited Jane to read at his wedding in 2018, it was more than an honor. It was an acknowledgement. A recognition of the woman who had carried his mother's memory with dignity and care, never exploiting, never explaining, just remembering. And that's how Jane Fellows lives. In a world obsessed with speed, she moves with intention. Where others seek to be seen, she seeks to understand. She doesn't chase legacy. She preserves it. Her greatest joys aren't found in diamonds or headlines, but in the things that require no witness at all. A page turned in the library, a grandchild's hand in hers, a silent prayer whispered in the garden at dusk. Because for Jane, peace was never something to retreat to. It was something to create. And she's done just that, not just for herself, but for those around her. Her home, her family, her values, all rooted in stillness, strength, and soulful simplicity. In a world that celebrates visibility, Lady Jane Fellows teaches us the quiet power of grace, legacy, and a life lived deliberately behind the scenes. If her story moved you, if her silence spoke louder than fame, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us on this journey. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary lives are the ones least seen, and the brightest lights are carried by those who never ask to be noticed.